This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award-winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.
Great. Thanks very much. Nice to be here. Thanks, Alec, for the invitation. I've heard some great speeches, some great input, and I think conferences like this give us a perspective of our reality. And I want to talk a little bit about our realities under this diminishing return of our freedoms and our liberties in this country. For the first decade, and people have spoken about in this conference, everything was right. Everything was good. Not everything. There were obviously challenges, but we had our average growth rates of 3.5%, 4%, a couple of 3 years in a row, 5%. We reduced our tax burden on society. We reduced our debt. Corporate taxes came down from 35% to 28% under Trevor Manuel. This was brilliant, but what happened? And why did it happen? Well, we know that Zuma came into power. That's history. But with that came a very extractive mindset that has been established and permeated throughout government. And it has gone from national to province to local government. And what happens in these extractive taxation economies is that they protect themselves. And as much as you try and force efficiency, wherever efficiency is introduced, they will find ways, creative ways, to spend that money. And Zuma would hide behind the fact that, this extraction is disguised as putting the ANC first, because with the ANC's success, flying on the coattails of Madiba's success, comes the success of a nation. But the extraction was for the ANC. And when people start acting this way at the highest levels, it permeates fast. And so every deal, every big deal that is entered into, infrastructure deals, systems and new processes and policies put in place that could be extractive, there had to be a funding flow to the ANC. And then they lost control. Today, the ANC doesn't even know how much is being stolen from its slice of the pie in every single municipality that it runs, in every single province, and at a national level in the departments that it still runs. It is a criminal entity. Nothing short of that. And, so he has to bring in people like Batabile Dlamini, Faith Mutambi in his days, Jomat Peterson, Becky Kele. We know them. Some of those have moved on, but they're still in the background. And people like Bladen Zamande, people like Gwede Mantashe, people like Paul Mashatile still exist. And they're there and they're in the thick of it. What is so strange is that we will allow them to decimate an entity like Eskom and then praise them when they start to fix the problem that they created. So this cadre deployment and extractive process is a serious attack on our liberties, because the more we pay in taxes, in lost revenues, in finding solutions for what we have to do, our liberties are minimized, are reduced. If you look at municipalities today, I often hear the story or the view that municipalities are broke. They can't be fixed with the revenue that they get. You just need to go back 17 years. Put all the mayors around the room now and say, take yourself back 17 years. If we gave you an increase in your rates and taxes in municipalities collectively, CPI plus 1%, plus another 1.5% to 2% to counter or cater for employment growth, would you be happy? Would you be able to run these cities and towns well? If you said that to any business, let's say CPI plus 1 in our income and cater for population growth, why would we fail? Remember, 17 years ago, every municipality was paying its electricity bills to Eskom, paying the water boards, resurfacing the roads, traffic lights were working. 17 years later, they've got all of that. They've gone from 155 billion rand in 2008 to 615 billion rand in revenue extracted from the residents and businesses of all these municipalities collectively, plus another 60 billion. So it's over that. And they're failing. They're not paying their electricity. So the money is there. And the same logic applies at national government. So why can we not do it? Well, what happens in times like this is that when you lose control, you start to defend yourself and you put systems in place to defend the extraction because you don't have enough and you need more. And when you lose control, more and more layers come into the system, more middlemen, and you get less RDP houses, less clinics, no medicines. People flee the system and it collapses. So what do we have to do? And you know, the audacity is when you listen to people like Gwede Mantashe, who said something quite extraordinary in the October 2021 Mine Workers Conference. He said, you know, it becomes embarrassing for us when ANC leaders enter the room. He says, people mutter, here come the thieves. Oh, that is so ironic coming from somebody like Gwede Mantashe, who benefited from BOSASA, who knew that BOSASA got corrupt contracts and he takes money from a corrupt entity. And he talks about, here come the thieves. He should look in the mirror. He was part of that problem. The same when Blade Nzimande says all thieves must leave the organization because they are polluting the ANC. You, Mr. Nzimande, know, and we know, and I like making these statements on a platform like this, because I'll invite you, Mr. Nzimande, to sue us when we say the SA Communist Party has benefited from the contracts that his networks inside higher education have paid to the SA Communist Party. We have those facts. This is the reality that we have and we sit with. And so in this extractive situation, we've got to ask ourselves, how do we stop this diminishing liberty that we need to protect? And they come in creative schemes, let me tell you. The ETOL scheme was an extractive system. It was hidden behind a user pays principle, road financing, and using technology. But actually what was happening was they were injecting a scheme into society that was going to tax a very concentrated part of the economy, 186 kilometers of roads, lots of rands of amounts. 27% would go to administration costs. The world average 10. So you can see the extraction. An overseas company, how do you get money out the country? And they forced this on you and I. We had a choice to make. And we can fight these systems. We were told at the time, you will never win this fight. You cannot challenge government. And our attitude was, if you adopt that approach, you will fail. And we said, stuff you, we will fight this. And we ended it a long time later, but we got there because we had to drive this fight away from business and into the minds of the people. You, the people, have more power than you think. What we learned at OUTA was that we had to empower people with the facts and the knowledge. And when you do that, so we've learned a lot, and we're doing the same thing now, and I'll talk to you about other ways of how to protect this, our liberties in this abusive, extractive situation we find ourselves in. With the power of knowledge, why the scheme was evil, why it was wrong, and what government couldn't do, which is everything they threatened you with, no vehicle licenses replaced, you will get bad credit ratings, you will go to jail. They instill the fear of God into society to introduce these extractive systems. And if you don't push back, it would have been headlines for a while, that people were angry, but it would have become our reality. And we fought back. It's gone. Because we managed to convince enough people to stand their ground and defy a system that is not in their best interest. Defy bad law. It was so lovely to see how society does get together and stand up when they're given the backing and the power. We promised to defend every individual and business if they were summoned to pay their bills. And we did that. And it's dead. Now you have a government that says, well, we're in load shedding. Let's bring 3-car Powerships into our harbors. Everybody's frustrated. We've got massive load shedding. Anything will do. But when you start to unpack it, one level of load shedding to get locked into a deal of 240 billion rand for 20 years, it makes no sense. It made no sense to allow that to happen. But we sat back. And so our team got together and said, we have to fight this. We found the loophole. We used our constitution. We used the rule of law. And we took them on their lack of environmental certification. It was a lovely fight. Government quickly realized they were not going to win it unless they circumvented this fight that we bought. Green Connection bought a similar fight. The two of us went to court in 2 different cases. How do you get around those powers, those barriers? You create a state of disaster on electricity. And that's exactly what Ramaphosa did in 2023 in February, after we'd filed our court papers in 2022 to block this whole deal. So he thinks he's going to circumvent our plan. So what do we have to do? We have to go and find another way to tackle him. We interdicted. We filed our papers 3 weeks later, and this is the beauty of OUTA. It has its own legal team, it has its own investigators, and it has its own mindset of sitting back, unpacking it, be rational, use the rule of law, and take them on at their own game. And so we interdicted his state of disaster on electricity. We had a few calls from people saying, don't do that, we need the electricity. Well, I'm telling you here now, with no load shedding, we would have been locked in to another 18 years for one level of load of electricity, 1,200 megawatts that we did not need. And the money comes in all the middlemen, contractors and suppliers of the gas. And that's where the ANC was going to extract billions from you and I for years. It's a very clever scheme. Anyway, we filed our interdict papers. 2 weeks later, the president's legal team contacted us and said we're throwing in the towel because we had produced the evidence that it would be new. There is an extractive system in the higher education space in the skills development levies through the seaters. I cannot tell you how extractive it is. This is Bladen Zamandi's domain, put his networks in. 20 billion rand a year, your and my skills development levies going into that pot. The Bureau of Economic Research, Stellenbosch, did a full thorough analysis on this. Over the last 13 years, that entity, those 21 seaters, have got an increase in revenue of 46% in those 13 years, and their output has reduced by 23%. 23% less students going through the system, less certification and bursaries, and 46% increase in income. What happens? Man, I could speak here all day about how they steal that money. So you have an opportunity as business, because in business, if you go to court and you can present to court a valid case of extraction without benefit to society, the mandate is being missed, I think collectively we could get the whole scheme stopped or certainly changed. Now, we don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater because there's a lot of good that should come from skills development levies. The question is, it needs to become more efficient. There's a summit, there's something that is required. We need to challenge them. We've put it to the minister. We've shown them all the corruption, but they look away. Why? Because this is good money to be made. This is good extraction. So it goes on and on and on. I think I'll get back to you on the skills development levy strategy and challenge one day, because we have to fight that collectively. And you've heard a few questions, and yesterday or the day before, somebody asked Rob Hersov, what can business do? This is what business can do. We can stand together. Business fears government. B4SA, they're doing some good stuff up there. Josie My Josie with Rosie Brosen, great stuff. We're never saying that don't get into that space of doing, because this is what happens when our liberties are robbed of us. We become the suppliers of the service. We start to fix our own neighborhoods. You look at great work done by Marina Costas in Better Bedford View, by Josie My Josie. Those are great initiatives. We have to do those. I'm not saying we mustn't do that. But when you start doing the work of government, they don't reinvent themselves. They don't pass the load that you've reduced on them back to society and lower taxes. They find the creative ways to spend that money. And that's the challenges that we must be careful that we don't become complacent, and we need to get up and stand up and fight that. NHI, it will fail. It's too big. It's too grandiose an extraction plan for them to even get it off the ground. But if we weren't fighting back, if we weren't vocal as civil society and business, I can assure you. So what happens in this extractive space is that governments have 3 avenues to follow. They're not going to pass the savings on to you. The system is set up to protect itself. And the money laundering and flow and theft continues. And it will continue, because the ANC's mindset is not to hold themselves accountable. They cannot. There are too many people. So you'll see someone like the CFO, senior manager at Gauteng Health, Madio, just be allowed to release and go with a confidential agreement. We won't allow that. We'll go after her, because Gauteng government knows that if she goes to jail, there's a lot of people connected to that flow of money. We'll have to answer questions in court. So we have to, this is the fight, and this is how civil society has strength that can push back. But if you sit back and accept that this is our new reality, bribing, paying an extra amount of money to have your plans passed quicker, some of these things just seem convenient, and I hear it all the time. It is the way it is. But we allow this. And we cannot allow it. We have to keep pushing back. So governments either have to borrow more money, which is what our government does. They either have to increase taxes, which they're trying to do as much as they can, or they just reduce service delivery. Those 3 are prevalent everywhere in this country. So how do we fix it? Well, if you challenge government, if you take them on, you can win. I've spoken about 3 or 4 incidences. There are many more. There are hundreds out there. And there's civil society. It's not just OUTA. There's a lot of good civil society organizations. You heard Piet from Sakelege. We've heard of Section 27, Corruption Watch. Every entity in their own right is doing excellent work out there. There are actually thousands of small entities doing great work in local communities. Every one of these entities needs help. And that help doesn't come out of thin air. In our organization, it doesn't come through volunteers. Because you build a long-term strategy, you have to be there. Some of our legal fights take years. We have to do this to defend the liberties. Civil society has far more power. And so it's so ironical that we sit here today and we have to use our money and reduce our liberties to take ourselves off a broken electricity grid and soaring energy prices. And then Eskom and the municipalities have the audacity to come back to us and say, you must register your solar systems. You must apply to us before you can fit these solar systems. Well, our response to them is bullshit. We are not going to tolerate that. Because this side of the meter is governed by the ARSHA, is governed by the Department of Labor. If I have a legal certificate of compliance, you have no right to tell me what to do. And don't hide behind, but this is all about, safety and balancing the grid. and all this crap. Because that's what it is. And they come at us with all these arguments. And it's not only at Eskom. First of all, they wanted us to sign off our solar systems with electrical engineers. I spoke to electrical engineers. They said, we don't know what this stuff's about. It's not our domain. This is build us. Some electrical engineers like it because they can charge an extra $5,000. It's absolute nonsense. So there's a big fight developing. Eventually, after we met at Eskom, they've dropped that. They've dropped that requirement, but they still want you to register. Why? Well, they want you to move off some meters onto smart meters. That's fine. But it's to extract through another mechanism of fixed costs. Now, we understand that. But you tell us all to go and get prepaid meters, and now you want us to go back the other way. What are you doing? You cannot make up your mind. You create this confusion, and then you come back to us and say, no, you must pay these fees. You must register. It's not going to happen. They have a deadline coming up on the 31st of March. But they've already said they won't cut people off, and they cannot fine you because we told them, try. We'll take you on. Try it. So when you cannot enforce your own laws and regulations, when you cannot switch the electricity off and fine, what are you going to do if I don't register? 10% of the solar systems have been registered with Eskom's accounts. There's 2 weeks left for the other 90%. They've been calling this thing for years. It's not going to happen. So you lose face as government. The sad thing is that the municipalities have jumped onto the bandwagon, and they're doing their own thing. We had a session with the Cape Town municipality, City of Cape Town, a couple of weeks ago. Cannot tell you the arrogance. You know, they sit there saying, but our people love us. Of course you run a better city. Of course you run better organizations. But that doesn't give you the right to abuse the system and demand these extra certifications. The other argument they give us is, yeah, but look, you know, it's only the wealthy who fit solar systems and the extra fee is only about 5%. Bull dust, man. You cannot have that rationale. There are middle class and poorer people that are renting these systems that then also have to pick up these costs. And by the way, it is still on this side of the meter. It's got nothing to do with you. So City of Cape Town, you need to stop sending these threatening letters to all the people out there who haven't registered their systems with you. And if you don't stop, and if you don't change your attitude, I'm afraid it's going to blow up in your face. You have a local election coming. Start thinking that even while you run good municipalities, you do not have the right to abuse your power in the way that you do that. So we will have to fight that on behalf of the citizens of Cape Town as well, if the need comes, and we'll fill you in on that space shortly. I just want to finish off by saying, in this modern society, never underestimate your power, but never underestimate the fact that there are people, there are institutions and there are organizations that are going to do the work for you. They're going to protect you from this abuse, but they need your help. There are a lot of people in this room that support what we do, and we appreciate that, because without that, we wouldn't be around. 35 staff costs us 3.5 million rand a month to run an organization like this. We should be 55, 60. The amount of stuff that comes at us daily, we can't get to. The whistleblowers are the most amazing people, and we've got to protect them. We've got to work with them. They're incredible people. But I just want to say this, that, you know, the greatest danger is when we as citizens just become complacent, when we resign to the fact that this is our new reality. We cannot allow that to happen. The moment we believe that this is just the way it is when our liberties literally start to diminish at such a fast rate, such a rapid rate. The real task now before us is not to simply fix the broken systems. There are political solutions, the type of stuff that Prince spoke about. But while those are being built and while we wait for those to come along, because ultimately that is what will fix this country, we as civil society have to keep fighting. Liberty is not protected by governments. It's protected by people like you and I who refuse to stop asking the tough questions. Thank you.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.